Monday morning! I am MPJ and you are watching FunFunFunction. Today we are exploring the Eve programming language. Also, in case you haven't already noticed, I have a bit of a goth hair color thing going on. And the reason for that is that today is the day after Halloween. I also still have like residue, like black makeup residue inside of my ears. I am also, as a result, hungover from sad Halloween. My energy levels are like So today we're just gonna do something relaxing. We're gonna check out Eve, a new hipstery programming language that I've been watching for a while and I wanted to get into, and we're just gonna have a good time. So what is Eve? 4 years ago, a fantastic, weird and wondrous guy called Brett Victor made a talk that he was titled Inventing on Principle. I've linked it below and you should absolutely watch it, but the TLDR is that Brett Victor is an ex-Apple engineer and he tends to invent these amazing UI concepts. And in this particular talk, he explores the idea of tools that give you an immediate feedback to what you're doing. So in the talk, he has made a couple of very cool prototypes to demonstrate the ideas that he has. He shows this pretty cool animation software with some very innovative thoughts. But the real cool thing that he shows is this conceptual programming environment that gives you immediate feedback to what you're doing and allows you to do all kinds of cool things like time travel debugging and stuff. When I saw this talk, I got really excited about there being a very different, fundamentally different way of doing software development. I think that the evolution of software development tools has been pretty slow in the last 10 years. Or perhaps not slow, but very, very incremental. It doesn't feel like anyone has rethought how we do things. From a creative standpoint, I feel like programmers are still stuck in the same dark ages that video editors were in before you had digital editing. So before we had softwares like Final Cut and iMovie and Adobe Premiere, and before movies were digital, what you had to do is that you had to take film strips and you would have to like physically cut them with a knife and then tape them together. Like that's how you did editing. And once you'd done that, you would put it back into the machine and look through it, and then you would realize, we should probably trim a little, and then you would have to cut them up again, and then put it back together, and then put it back into the machine. That is very cumbersome compared to how it is today, when you can just, you just drag the clips in, you trim them a little, and you can play immediately, no rendering times or anything. It just, boom, plays you exactly what you need, and you can scrub back and forth and see exactly where to make the cut. It's very, very interactive. But programming is absurdly enough stuck in this old world. When you make a change in your code, there's almost always quite a bit of some kind of compilation time or loading time or something. Even if you have a fancy live reloading environment, it's very rare that you have like a feedback cycle that is less than 1 second. And with native mobile development, it's not at all uncommon with build times that are up to a minute long or even longer. And even if you have an environment where you actually manage to set up a very fast save, reload, compile, push, show the application loop, the application will still reset its state every time. So let's say that you have a bug that arises when you open a menu and then click a thing and then add another thing in that thing. There's a couple of steps involved to reproduce the bug. So while you're trying to fix this, when you make an edit, you have to wait for the thing to reload, and then you have to manually go through and click and open the menu and then add that thing and then do that thing and see if your fix worked. So for most developers, modern development tooling is not like the tooling that professional video editors has today. It's more like the tooling that video editors had before digital tooling existed, when they had to, you know, do a little cut there and then put it in, and then they had to look at the movie from start to finish in order to see if their edit was good or not. I really think that there is a future where we can do better, and Brett Victor in his talk really showed a hint of that future, even though it was just a prototype. A couple of months after that talk was released, a developer called Chris Granger, he's an ex-Microsoft dude, he released Lighttable, which was a tiny prototype app and a blog post and a video demonstrating a real implementation of the principles that Brett Victor had shown in his talk. It was an amazing proof of concept, and people were very excited, and Chris eventually ended up creating a Kickstarter to fund the development of Lighttable. I was a backer of this campaign because I was super excited, and the campaign got funded, and also Y Combinator went in to fund the company as well. So the project has been very well funded even since its inception. Lighttable was a really fun project to follow, but eventually development started to, you know, wind down and nothing much happened, and I just figured that, yeah, well, but a few months later, Eve arrives on the scene, which is like the next step in the evolution of this thinking process. So Eve is not an editor or an IDE, it's actually a programming language and a platform and an editor rolled into one. I realize that this kind of tooling is very controversial to a lot of people. A lot of people are very fond of their specific setup and their tooling, and that is fine. But Eve has so many interesting ideas that I think that we should put those aside for a little bit and allow ourselves to explore what Eve has to say. Because even if we decide not to use Eve, I think that there is a lot of things that can be learned from Eve that we can bring back to our home programming environments and toolings and programming languages. Eve has some very interesting design principles. So it, first of all, it's a literal programming language. Or perhaps it's called literate programming. I'm not sure. The main idea is that you write your program sort of like a document. An Eve program doesn't look like a normal program, the source code. It reads more like a programming article on Medium. It's flowing text in English, and then there are blocks inside it with the actual code. So let me show you an example. This is the Eve programming environment. It's available with some examples at playwitheve.com. Or you can run this locally yourself. It's open source, and it's just an implementation of a Flappy Bird kind of game. I just click here, and it just, you know, I'm supposed not to hit the pipes, and yeah, game over. On the left-hand side here, you see the source code, so to speak, of the Flappy Eve program. So it's these nice headers and markdown blocks, and which explains what the software is about. And yeah, here's the setup. And here is some code. I scroll down a bit, and you see that, oh, here's more code blocks, and they're described, like draw the game world. And here's the game menus. It explains how this works. You also notice that the programming language, the language is very, very terse. It's not a lot of code here to make this game. It's pretty impressive how expressive this language is. And I want to stress that this is the actual programming environment. Let's see if I can introduce an error here or something. If I do this, yeah. All right, you see that get error messages in line here, and I just change it and it works. What is also cool about Eve is that everything is centered around data. I often feel like in object-oriented programming languages, a lot of programming tends to get in the way. You have to create objects, and then you have to create factories, and then you have to create factories for factories, and then you have to create design patterns in order to, yeah, you know, like there's a lot of stuff. And functional programming languages also tend to have a lot of this fluff. There's monads, and there's partials, and there's currying. It's a lot of like that is not about the data that you're actually manipulating, and Eve is very focused on the data. So pretty much everything in Eve is a record, and records, they look like this. This is a record. The first thing that happens here is that we commit 4 records here to our game world. Let's have a look at this second line here. This is a record. And records, when I first saw them, I felt like they had a lot of similarities to the object literals in JavaScript, you know? Like this world thing here, this would have been written like screen menu, if this, I'm just making this up, like this is not JavaScript, but if it was, I would take the frame here and paste it in. Like you can see the similarities here, right? I'm gonna delete that. So just like object literals in JavaScript, these properties, they are not ordered in any way. So if I move this code and move that here and move it before distance, that's the same object, and that is valid just like JavaScript object literals. What confused me was these hashtag world thing, and they looked weird, and I didn't really understand what they were at first, but they are actually just shorthand for writing tag world. See? That's the same thing, it's just syntactic sugar. If I do the same thing for this one, obstacle, the record below, it would be tag string obstacle. Same thing here. This is exactly the same thing as writing tag obstacle. I'm gonna revert that back to the tag syntax there. And the reason why there's a shorthand for tag is that tags are used a ton in the Eve programming language. Let's go down a little bit here to drawing the game world. What is really cool about Eve is that it is a very simple programming language. There's not a lot of things you need to learn to use it. And that is partially because it's a young programming language. In JavaScript was very simple from the beginning, but now we have generators, and we have arrow functions, and we have 3 different ways of declaring variables. There's many different ways of creating objects, and la 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 la. But Eve has only 2 operations. Basically looking at records and writing to records, sorta. And we look for records by using search. And here we assign to the variable world every record that matches this pattern. And remember that this thing here, this is the same thing as writing tag world. It's just shorthand for that. And I'm gonna go up here and write this out again to remind you of this. Tag world. So up here we have committed this record, and this search operation here will, as soon as one of those records appear, it's going to slurp that up, and for every world that it sees, every world record, that is going to be assigned to the world variable. And then it's going to proceed executing this block. And remember, this happens for every world. We only have one world here, but if we had multiple of them, like these obstacles here, for example, these are multiple obstacles that are being committed as records to the game world, then this search operation would match all of them, and it would run through this thing for every one of those records. A subtle thing is that these things here, like the blocks, are not necessarily executed in order. This might be executed after this block, for instance. Like the ordering of these blocks does not really matter to Eve. Ordering of code just doesn't have much of a consequence in Eve because everything executes as everything is reactive, basically. So this thing will execute as soon as there is any change to the record set of records in the database that are tagged with world. So as soon as this block here, it has a world. Before this commit line here is executed, this code will basically not proceed. So the first time this code is running, we won't really see a world, and this block will not execute. It will not continue. So search is kind of like this filter, or kind of like an event. It's kind of sort of like an event listener, maybe. And this is the callback to that event listener, kind of. So once we have our world, we'll proceed to this commit block here. Commit blocks, they write records. Search observes records according to a pattern, and commit blocks, they write records. And commit blocks can operate on a database. In this case, the database is the browser database. And the database in Eve is, I guess, kind of like, I interpret it as just a bucket where you can put records. And the browser database, it is observed by some browser bindings that Eve has, and that is what is drawing things on screen. So you actually don't manipulate the DOM directly in Eve. Instead, you write and create records in the browser database. So here, I'm not completely sure what is going on here. This here is a, if we look at this, this is a div record, right? So this is again just a record with a tag name of div, but it's syntactic sugar for that. And a div, whenever browser sees a record with divs, it's going to draw those to the screen. And whenever Eve sees records, div records with the tag div written to the browser database, it's going to draw the equivalent divs to the DOM in the actual browser. So you see here that this is basically just DOM, it has style, and you see here, again, just like JavaScript object literals, Eve records can contain other Eve records. So this style attribute here, it contains yet another record inside of it. It's user select, and it has some Java CSS and some fancy CSS and some SVG children. I guess that this is the game window. This is some kind of rectangle. This is an image, and this is the background. And then there's some other rectangle. I don't know exactly what these things are, but it's stuff that is being drawn to this SVG on the screen. This little buddy here, this is the merge operator. So what that means is that all this stuff here, this div, which contains all of this children, I think that this is all just one big div. That is being merged into the world record. So I guess that world record will also get a tag div. This thing confuses me a bit. Perhaps somebody that is more familiar with Eve can explain it, or somebody that can just read docs, unlike me. I feel confused about the fact that records can have multiple tags. To me, that is unnatural. Perhaps it's just because I think of them too much as JavaScript objects, but I don't know. It's just weird. But I think that this results in the world getting all of this stuff inside of it. So world is actually both the div and the record that maintains stuff like gravity and frame. I'm not entirely sure. So when I see the merge operator, I tend to think a little bit of object.assign in JavaScript, or the ... operator in ES7. What else should we check out? We can check out how score calculation works. That's pretty interesting. So you see here, like, remember the search operator, search tool, search thing, search. If I scroll up again and see, like here where we drew the game world here, we were basically just, let me just change that back to the original, to just world. Here we were searching for records that had the tag world, but you can, like, this pattern can be much more than that. You can see here, like, in the score calculation here, we also add distance here to the pattern. And this means that this bind block here that is associated with the search will execute every time we get a world with a new distance. So as soon as distance updates on the world, this bind block will be run for that world. And you see the bind here, it updates the world's score. This operator here, that means to set this attribute on the world object, and it just takes the distance of the world, basically how far we've gotten with our flappy bird, and then we assign that to the score after we floor it so that we don't get decimals. This is, by the way, how you call functions in Eve. I haven't gotten too much into that yet, so I don't fully understand it, but there's a bunch of built-in functions in Eve, and they look like this. You just call floor, and then these brackets here. So you don't use parentheses like you would do in most programming languages, and that is actually to emphasize the fact that functions are also records in Eve. So it's not a functional-oriented programming language, it's actually a record-oriented programming language, I guess. Or perhaps pattern-based programming language, maybe? Also, a thing that I really like is that function arguments are not ordered. So in most programming languages, floor would have, like, there would be value 1, value 2, and so forth. Like, it would just be like the order of the parameters determine what value it was. But in Eve, all of it is again records. So you see here, like, distance is being assigned to the parameter value that is being passed to floor. So if it had any more arguments that you would have to pass to floor, like say option 2, 1 or something, and you would assign that value here. So you can always infer what the hell is going into the function without actually going into and looking at the method, the function signature. You can see it just by looking at it, which is very nice. So you see here that we use bind here to change the score, and up here we use commit. I'm not completely sure about the difference between the two. I know that bind is aware of the life cycle of the records that it's matching, while commit just does whatever thing it does permanently. So if there is a record that it's going to disappear after a little while, they will still, these records that commit creates will still persist, while stuff that, for instance here, like the browser is binding the screen menu thing, it will add these text items here, but as soon as this stops matching, these records will also die. Bind basically sort of matches the life cycle of the objects that it matches. So if it creates them, they will also have a short life cycle. I'm not completely sure, still figuring this out. I'm not even sure if this is a good way to program, but I'm very excited about it somehow. It's just so different and intriguing, and it's just fun. It makes my brain go all tingly good. I encourage you all to go to playwitheve.com, and as soon as you do, you will end up at this quick start, which is actually an editable environment. It's pretty cool. So if I remove this, and it will update over here. See, or I can just stuff, and I run again and it updates. And it will walk you through the basic concepts of records and blocks, and teach you how to write an application, sorta. Eve, pattern matching, cool programming language, you should check it out. You have just watched an episode of FunFunFunction. I release these every Monday morning, 0800 GMT. If you haven't already, you should check out the channel below and see if it's something that you might want to consider subscribing to. I am MPJ. Until next Monday morning, stay curious.